Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Amber Harper from the Burned In Teacher Podcast and a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome to episode 39 of the EduMagic podcast. My name's Dr. Sam Fessich, and welcome to 2020! I have had so many listeners direct message me or email me and ask when I'm doing an episode about the EdTPA. Well, you've asked for it, and it's here, the EdTPA episode with Kali Thompson. She's going to be sharing about some tips and strategies to help your EdTPA experience go from meh to marvelous. So let's get started. Head on over to sfessich.com/39. There you'll see a freebie created by Kelly that talks about how Nearpod can help with your EdTPA. Also on that same site, sfessich.com/39, you can find a coupon code to help you get 30 days of Nearpod Gold for free. You'll thank me later. All right, let's jump into this episode. I am so excited to learn more with you about the EdTPA and how Nearpod can help you be successful. Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. Here I have with me Haley, and we were able to connect this summer and chat a little bit while you were interning at Nearpod, and this conversation of EdTPA came up. Could you share a little bit about, first of all, what it is and why future teachers need to do it? And then we're going to talk about some nitty-gritty stuff regarding EdTPA, and we're going to end our conversation a little bit about how Nearpod can help you accomplish the EdTPA.
So I'm from Georgia, and I actually had to go through the EdTPA process, and it's an assessment that pre-service teachers have to go through. It's kind of paced out throughout your last year in the College of Ed, and there are certain tasks you have to complete. So instead of being an assessment in the form of a standardized test, it is your task aligns with your placement in a classroom, your student teaching, and you are creating like lesson plans. You teach the lesson and then you reflect on that lesson and have assessments in there. And so it's more of like a critical analysis of the process through which you go through when you're teaching. And then you're graded on that based off of a rubric that's, it's sent off to some anonymous person.
I'm sure that causes maybe some stress and some anxiety for those teachers pursuing their EdTPA. What are some best practices that you have in mind for our future teacher friends who are now in the midst of EdTPA season?
So I pretty much did it in 2 weeks, which is not what I advise at all.
So don't, in case you're listening, don't do it in 2 weeks. Maybe pace it out a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think the best thing is like figuring out kind of the time management and figuring out the pace of setting out like this time each week to kind of go in and answer a couple questions or edit or reflect on something. That way, you're doing the process over the full semester and it really gets the time that it's needed. It definitely was an interesting process. I've looked at more of like the history of EdTPA or where it started, and it's founded in Stanford University. So that's pretty interesting. So it's interesting now too to see like the states that are taking this up. And I think the point is to make teachers think more critically, or pre-service teachers think more critically about what they are doing when they're going through this process, so they take that into the classroom. So the concept I think is good. It is, I think the stress level of it is kind of hard, and that's where I'm like, for pre-service teachers, it's, really focusing on being like mindful for yourself and figuring out ways for you to de-stress and like trying to not put all this anxiety into this test, because it was really stressful for me. You're student teaching and you're having to do this. It's a lot to balance. So being very mindful of your body and managing that stress is really important.
So let's go through the steps that
you do to complete the EdTPA? What are some objectives and things that you need to be working on or maybe collecting throughout your college career that you can kind of save yourself some teacher time there, where you're maybe collecting material or, maybe documenting in some sort of way? Is there any tips for that?
I think for me, it was just being aware of like the type of lesson I wanted to create, because everything, the collection for EdTPA has to be done during your student teaching time. You can't take anything you can't take materials or assessments or anything like that from like students you had worked previously with. So, but it was like the lesson I did was a lesson that I got from a teacher that I observed in a classroom and like went very well. So I think it's just being mindful when you're in teacher placement, really observing and looking at the things that are going well or that they're doing well, so that when you go through this process, you can think about those things. You have those things in your teacher toolbox and you can put them into place, because part of EdTPA too is like filming yourself, and they look at that as well, and you have to reflect on the video that you send in. So being mindful of like the whole process of teaching, like it's not just planning a lesson, and it's not just teaching the lesson, and it's not just reflecting, it's like all of it together.
Right.
And we're mindful when we are observing teachers of that whole process and ask questions and take the time to get to know other teacher processes and kind of like analyze and observe that. I think that could be really helpful when you go through the EdTPA process.
And tell us about some of those objectives that need to be met. Maybe they're across the board, pre-K to 12.
Yeah. So for early childhood, you have to do the longer portion of EdTPA is structured around reading. And then there's a small section that's around math. Whereas if you're in middle grades or high school, you're only specifically focused on your subject area. So there are 4 sections in elementary, and I think only 3 in middle and high. So 3 sections for reading, and then the 1 section for math. And the 3 sections are divided by the planning, the process, and then kind of like the assessment and reflection of that. And so in the planning process, you're looking at your lesson plans that you have to upload into like the format that they suggest, and then you're reflecting on like what you put into that lesson plan and why you think it will be effective. The teaching process is that portion of the rubric is looking at submitting your videos and looking at the way you taught and reflecting critically on what you were doing in that video. And then the third piece is like the assessment piece. So you have a pre-assessment that you have to give students and a post-assessment. So you're really analyzing growth and data. And the math section takes all 3 of those pieces and kind of pushes them together. All the rubrics use very similar vocabulary, or just like the way they're phrasing the standards is very similar, pushing you to think analytically and critically about what is going on through the whole thing. Like, what are you seeing? What are you observing? Why do you think this is going to work? Did they grow? Did they not grow? Why do you think that is? It's very analytical.
Now, for our student teachers who are getting ready to submit their materials, do you have any tips and strategies for them to?
Recording, I just used my phone, and I bought like a small tripod, and I just kind of set it up in the corner, and I would let it run the whole time, and then I just kind of edited it on my computer and clipped out certain pieces, and that was easier for me. People who would get like somebody to, like a teacher, somebody to hold it, I just didn't feel like that was as natural. It seemed I kind of hid my camera. Like the kids knew it was there, but after like the initial first 5 minutes of me saying that it was there, there was none of the kids were looking at the camera anymore, and that made it easier. Like the room felt more natural, and it didn't feel like, oh, I'm filming this.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some strategies when students are getting all those materials together, their lesson plans, their videos, and being analytical and understanding what they taught and why it worked or maybe why it didn't, and really diving into the pedagogy and how they taught it? What are some strategies to help our future teachers get all that done?
So I kept a binder, and that was helpful for me. I think going back, I wish I would have kept a journal, just like something that was in my purse or my bag or whatever that I could have pulled out at any time and just taken observations or notes on, just to have something to reflect back on when I was writing and it not just be going off of memory. I feel like that would have been way more helpful. document.
Yes, yeah, because you think you're going to remember, but you don't. Yeah.
Don't. And you just never know what you might be able to reflect upon and what might be interesting to talk about, or you might be able to analyze. Making sure that, of course, you're only using documents that you have permission to use, because you have to have consent forms for students. So just being really careful about that and marking out names. And I had a binder, so like everything was kept in one place, and that was really helpful for me. I even printed out there's a whole handbook that goes with EdTPA, because I wanted to mark up all the rubrics, and just so I knew consistently like what I was supposed to be answering and what I should be thinking about while I'm in the classroom. Like that knowledge was really helpful.
Now, there is one tool that we kind of teased at the beginning of our episode, Nearpod, which is a fantastic tool. Could you give us a little rundown of what Nearpod is, how future teachers can access it, and how it can help them achieve their EdTPA goals?
Yeah, so Nearpod is a student engagement platform. It allows teachers to create a lesson and then embed different types of interactive activities. You can embed in assessments in there, videos, just
so much with Nearpod. And I love that it keeps track of who's on the slide. So if you want to upload one of your PowerPoints you've already created, don't recreate the wheel, throw it into Nearpod, and you can see who's on the slide. You can do quick assessments.
One of the main things when I think of EdTPA is the assessment factor, because that's a huge portion of being a teacher.
Right.
And Nearpod just kind of opens the door for that to be very easy, the way it keeps track of all your reports. So just having it all online and just being able to screenshot it and send that in as your assessment piece would have been really convenient. And you can still see growth and things like that. And it would allow you to differentiate a lesson. So for instance, myself with Nearpod, I take one lesson, and then if I need to reteach, I would make a copy of that lesson and just edit different pieces of it. So then I still have some of maybe the same assessments in there, but I'm allowed to put in new things to help kind of clear up any misconceptions or reach that student where they need to be on their level. And so I think that ability of like reteaching, which is a part of EdTPA.
It really is. And all the data is right there in front of you. You can export it to Excel. You can do all the charts and all the pretty things and see where your students are in their understanding right there. You can even do like a check-in with your students to see how they are.
And if you're videoing that, a piece of it, your video is talking about student engagement. I've never not been in a classroom where my students aren't engaged when we're doing a Nearpod lesson. That's like a huge thing too when someone is observing. Like you can see that the kids are interested and engaged and they're interacting with what's going on. And so I think that piece of it too, you're doing all the things like with Nearpod, it's kind of like allowing you to do the things that EdTPA is wanting you to do, and then you can reflect upon it very easily.
Right. I love that. Do you have any strategies or tips to help students think through their reflection besides the typical, what did I do good and what should I improve?
Thinking back on the pedagogies we're taught, not just saying like, what did I do good and what did I do bad, but like, okay, if I think this went well, why do I think that went well? What maybe does that pedagogically go back to, or how is that student reacting to that, and why might that be good, and kind of analyzing it more on a higher level. Why do I think this went well? But okay, if I think this went well, why is that? Like what's backing that up?
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And thinking through, were my students engaged? Do they meet my objectives? Those types of questions as well to help bolster that. And that can help trigger some ways to think, okay, this is why I think it went well. My students met my objectives, and here's how I know that. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Do you have any other tips or strategies to share with our future teacher friends who are embarking upon their EdTPA?
Don't get overwhelmed. I think it's really like taking it piece by piece is the best advice I could give.
Ending on that piece of advice, seek help, ask questions, find people that are going to help you and support you. Truly, if we could end this episode, you got this, you can do this, you've been trained to do this, try your best. And you can honestly say, I've done my best, and that's all you can ask for. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, so highly recommend following me on Twitter, Kali Kali Thompson, THOMPSON, and then it's seconds with the 2 ND.
And I'll link to that in our show notes so people can find you.
And then Nearpod has a really great Facebook page, Nearpod Teachers. If you search that, it should come up. That's a great resource. They post a lot of things on there, but they're also super active on Twitter and Instagram and are always posting things that are helpful.
All right, Edumagicians, there you have it. Head on over to sfessich.com/39. There you'll find Kaylee's Nearpod and EdTPA PDF that she created just for you. You also find an extra little bonus in there from me. And you're also going to find the coupon code to get 30 days of Nearpod Gold for free. You're welcome.
And there you have it, Edumagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessich.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessich. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.